Hi, let's talk a little bit more about methods. You've learned a little bit about classes and objects in general, and one of the things we said about classes is that they can have one or more methods defined in them. So let's learn a little bit more of the details of what we can do with methods. So each method has the following syntax. Now let's take a look at this and look at it piece by piece. The method name is what you're going to call. Hey, Mr. I, get name, get your email address. That would be the method name. Before the method name, though, you start out with a scope. The scope is either public or private. A public method is one that can be executed from outside the class itself. That's generally what you're going to want. You want to expose these behaviors as these are all the things that an object of this class can do. It's possible that you need to have other methods that your public methods call that nobody else has any business seeing, but in general, you're going to make your methods public. Then you either include the word static or you don't include the word static. Now, if you leave static out completely, that's the type of method we're talking about, that an object has a behavior. You say the name of the object dot the name of the method, and it goes and executes it. Non-static methods, which are the ones where you leave that blank, can't be executed unless an object has already been instantiated of the class that contains that method. Now, static methods can be executed without instantiating an object. Do you remember seeing the word static in any of our code before? Yeah, hopefully you're thinking of public static void main, where we didn't create an object of the type of class that had that main method in it, but we could still execute the main method. Static methods are not that common. There are occasions to use them. We'll do some examples in the practice videos. The return type is any valid data type, like int or boolean or double or string or scanner or the name of any class that you've created. It's what this method returns. When it's done executing, it passes back a value to the calling program. If you don't want it to pass anything back, use the word void. You remember you saw that in public static void main. If there is something you want to pass back, you have to put the type. Then method name, parentheses, the argument list. Then, as always, when we have multiple statements in Java, an opening brace and a closing brace, and whatever statements make up that method. So here's some examples. You could have public string getName taking no parameters. That means it returns a value of type string. It's public, so it can be seen outside of whatever class it's written in. It doesn't take any values passed in. The next one, public void update name. It won't pass anything back because of the word void, but it does take one input, whatever you pass in the variable that's a string type variable in parentheses that this method is going to call n. Public boolean is enrolled in string class both returns something. It's going to return a true or false value, a boolean, and it's going to take an input, string, maybe the class that you're in. And then public static void main string args. Okay, we can almost understand this entire statement now that you sort of took on faith 2 weeks ago when we first did it. Public static void main. Public, it can be seen outside of the class it's defined in. Static, you don't have to create an object of this class in order to execute it. Void, it returns nothing. Main, that's the name of the method. And it takes one argument called args, which is a string, and we haven't yet gotten to those square brackets, what those mean. It's something that'll come up in our next lesson when we learn about arrays. Now, if a method has a non-void return type, if you're passing back an int or a boolean or a double or a string or any other type, then you have to have a return statement in your method. You can have more than one, but when it sees return, what happens is return then the name of the value or the variable and a semicolon. As soon as Java executes that, it takes the value or variable that you had after the word return and passes that back to the calling program, the one that invoked your method. So some examples: you could return true if your return type was Boolean. You could return student name. Let's say student name is a string and your return type was a string. You could return 5 plus I if your return type was an int. You could return a more complicated expression. You could return is enrolled in intro to programming if is enrolled in passes back a Boolean and you need to pass back a Boolean. So you can put these together, nest them as deeply as you want, as long as it makes sense to you. Don't get too complicated. If it's hard for you to understand, you're probably going to make a mistake. Now notice, you can only return one value. You can only pass back one value using a return statement. And in the method declaration, you had to say what that type was. If you want to pass back more, you have to use more complicated structures, such as arrays or array lists, where you're passing back one thing, but that one thing is a list of maybe 20 integers. That's going to be the topic of lesson 4. For now, you can only return one value. Now here's something that's tough for some beginning programmers to get used to. Parameters are passed to methods by value, not reference. When you call a method, Java creates a copy of the value of each parameter and stores it using the variable name from the argument list. This means that changing the value of a passed-in parameter doesn't change the value in the calling routine. In other words, if you're passing something in your parameter list, say int n, and inside your method you say n plus plus, you're adding 1 to the value of n, you can use that value that's changed inside the method. But when you return from your method to the calling program, the variable has the same value it had when you first went into the method. So it doesn't change the value. But what if you pass in an object? Let's take a look at that situation. Remember the diagram from the end of video 3b? One in which I had a variable that contained a pointer to where the object actually lived in memory. I think our example was S1 was a student, and S1 just contained, here's the address of where the data for the student really lives in memory. Well, what gets passed in, if you're passing in a student, is just that S1, just that pointer, and that won't ever get changed. But what it points to could get changed. So if you pass in an object, Java will copy the value of the pointer to the object, but there's still only one copy of that object in memory. So if you change anything in that object in the called method, it stays changed. Now, this is a tough concept to get used to. Hopefully it'll be a lot clearer after you look at the practice videos. So why don't you make sure you make a note of that if this isn't crystal clear to you, to watch the practice videos until this seems